make this word confusing is that it can mean something really good when referring to the sense of pleasure we get from doing something well or owning something. We take pride in our hard work, or we take pride in our car or our house. You get the idea. But then there's the pride that means conceit, a sense that we are better than others or don't need others. And that is the one we all need to avoid if we want to have great relationships. Now, you may think that you don't have a pride problem, but the truth is that pride can be sneaky. The ways it can show up in our lives can look and feel like admirable traits, like being independent, strong, self-made. Technically, American culture assigns a lot of value to people who don't back down from a fight, speak their mind freely, make their own dreams happen. But is that really the best way? And what does that lead to in terms of having great relationships that you can count on? Pride exacts a pretty hefty price. Amongst other things, it'll cost you real, authentic, intimate relationships. Because when we're going around pretending like we need nobody and no one, we close the door to finding people who will accept us for the person we are inside. We even close the door to having a deep and meaningful and personal relationship with God. And we miss out on one of the best things in life, connection. Thankfully, we aren't the first people on earth to try and figure out how to keep the pride monster from keeping us from the things we want most, like great relationships. The Apostle Peter wrote a letter thousands of years ago giving us some great insight on how to keep our pride in check. He writes in 1 Peter chapter 3, "Finally, all of you be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate, and humble." Now, when Peter says be like-minded, he isn't meaning be the same. God didn't create us to all be alike. That would be a really, really boring world. What Peter is saying is we should be of one like mind that agrees to love and accept one another for who we are on the inside. To have a group that is like-minded means that we all agree to be certain things for each other, which is what the rest of the verse is talking about. And then Peter lists actions we can all take that will help us fight against the temptation of pride, thinking we can handle life on our own. He says to be sympathetic, to love one another, to be compassionate, and finally, to be humble. Now, here's the tricky part. Maybe you're good at being sympathetic toward others. You'll listen and be understanding when someone is sharing about failing a test or not making the basketball team. Maybe you're working hard to love others, to accept people for their strengths and faults. And maybe you are so stinking compassionate, you're thinking, Jen, you don't even know how good I am at compassion. And you might need a little work on the humility side, but come on, you are winning at the rest of these. But how are you doing at receiving sympathy? How often are you honest enough and transparent enough with others that they can see you need comfort or encouragement? How are you doing at letting others see, like really see, your strengths and faults so they can truly love you? How often are you vulnerable enough that others can demonstrate compassion and acts of kindness towards you? Are you humble enough to recognize you need others? That you actually can't do it alone? You aren't perfect? You do need help? How's that going for you? See, pride says it needs no one, it is good enough on its own, and it is always right. And that's why pride will isolate you and leave you lonely and alone. Because what Peter shares as being the recipe for great relationships is the opposite of everything pride says. Pride says you need nothing and no one. Peter says we all need to agree to give each other sympathy and love and compassion because we all need each other. Pride says it's good enough on its own. But Peter points out that we all need to love one another because we all have strengths and faults. None of us is perfect. Pride says being right matters more than any relationship. But Peter reminds us that we don't know it all. We don't always get it right. And when we don't, we can humble ourselves and say we're sorry. We can ask for help when we need it. We can say, I don't know. Pride isolates us, but humility unites us. You all are going to take the rest of today to unpack this a little more because it sounds so easy in theory, right? But doing it, not so simple. And we want to make sure that you never leave here having heard something without knowing what to do next. So take some time and process this with your group. It's an opportunity to begin putting what Peter wrote into practice. Start with this question. Which lie that pride says are you most tempted to believe? Is it that you don't need anyone? That you know what's best or right always? Or maybe that you're good enough on your own? Which lie is keeping you from great relationships today? Talk about that, and we'll see you next week.